Since we've been working through 1 Timothy, I thought it would be a good opportunity to have a quick look at the passage we've analyzed in the Passion Translation. If you don't know what the Passion Translation is, it is a recent paraphrase by a man called Brian Simmons, but it claims to be a translation. It's not a translation. It's at best a paraphrase of the Bible. And what I thought I would do is just to walk you through what I see when I look at the Passion Translation in a passage that we've looked at fairly intently. So with that in mind, let's go and have a look at 1 Timothy 1 verses 3 to 7. So this on the left-hand side is the SBL Greek New Testament, one of the major current editions of the Greek New Testament. Don't worry that it's probably all Greek to you. I'll walk you through it as we go. But the first thing I want to point out, so this is the Passion Translation on the right-hand side. And the first thing we spot is this footnote, which points down to over here. And it says, as translated from the Aramaic. Now this is immediately a bit bizarre, and one of the things that's striking is that there are 1,500 of these claims in the New Testament alone. And Simmons claims that he's translating from Aramaic originals. The problem is that there are no Aramaic originals. The New Testament is written in Greek. All of our early manuscripts are Greek. He's probably working from something that is a later Syriac translation into a different dialect of Aramaic. The argument goes that Aramaic was the dominant spoken language in Palestine in the time of Jesus, and that's probably true that Jesus and the apostles grew up speaking Aramaic. But this letter is being written in Ephesus over here. Ephesus is a Greek city. The spoken language is Greek. The dominant language is Greek. It makes absolutely no sense to claim that he's translating from an Aramaic original of 1 Timothy, and he does this throughout the New Testament. So this is frankly just a bogus claim, seemingly to try and seem more scholarly than he is. Okay, so let's see what we see as we continue. I'm asking that you remain in Ephesus to instruct them, and then he says, not to teach or follow the error of deceptive doctrines, all of which translates this Greek phrase, me heterodidaskalin, literally not to teach anything otherwise, contrary to the gospel. And this is typical of what you do when you paraphrase. You add additional words to try and clarify nuances that you believe are in the text. So our verse actually says teach, and he's added follow to unpack some of that, and then he's also added error into that. That's fairly common for paraphrases. You wouldn't do that in a translation. You would simply render this as not to teach any different doctrine or something similar. If we go on to verse 4, by the way, one of the things you'll notice is that the Passion Translation is always significantly longer than the Greek text. This is fairly characteristic of it being a paraphrase. Paraphrases tend to be longer because you're kind of explaining what you think the nuances and sense is. So it says, nor to pay attention to cultural myths. Our Greek word here is simply mythis, which means myths. So Simmons has added the word cultural to indicate that he believes they are cultural myths. Maybe they were, but most scholars would take the myths as referring to myths about Old Testament scriptures, perhaps creation stories, not to Greco-Roman cultural myths. So this is an interpretation. The word traditions is not in the Greek, and then we have endless study of genealogies. So what we literally have here is genealogias aperantis, endless genealogies. So once again, the traditions here has been inserted. All right, those digressions only breed, and then we have controversies and debates, which is translating the word exegesis, speculations, And the word does have a connotation of speculations that lead to controversy and conflict. So no problem with this. This is typical of what you do when you're paraphrasing. They are devoid of power that builds up and strengthens the church in the faith of God. I don't have a problem with that. I think that's fairly routine. Then we come to verse 5, and the Passion Translation starts with the word for. For is an explanatory or causal conjunction. What we have in Greek is, goodness gracious, somebody trying to break my house down. What we have in Greek is the conjunction there, which tends to simply mark a new development in the narrative. For is a very surprising translation. This is often left untranslated, or it's translated with something like now or but, depending on context. And then something quite significant here. The Passion Translation says, we reach the goal of fulfilling all the commandments when we love others. Notice that we have two occurrences of the word we here. And what's fairly prominent is that the Passion Translation has this verse focusing quite significantly on what we do. We reach the goal when we love others. What does the Greek actually say? It says to telos, which means either the aim or the result, tes parangelias, of the charge, the commandment, or the instruction. Now this charge is referring probably most directly in the context to the charge Timothy has been given by Paul to tell certain people to stop teaching error, and more broadly to the outcome or purpose of Christian instruction. So Christian instruction, and specifically the instruction to Timothy, the outcome of that, telos, or if you want to take it as the aim, so be it, the outcome of that is that it produces love. Notice that in the original, it's God working through the gospel who transforms people, with the result being love. It's not something we are supposed to be doing. So I think that's quite a significant distortion of emphasis. There are a few other things about this phrase as well that stand out. We reach the goal. No, it's not something we attain. It's rather what the gospel does in us. So this word reach is dubious. Of fulfilling all the commandments. Wow, where did he get that? The word here in Greek is tes parangelias, which literally means of the charge or the instruction or the commandment, referring to perhaps a particular commandment or perhaps the outcome of Christian instruction more broadly. But to make it all the commandments and turn commandments into plural, I think is quite misleading. And then again, this emphasis on what we do over here when we love. Well, it's more that we are transformed into loving people than that we actively try to change ourselves by going out and loving others. The rest of the verse, no problem. Then we come to verse 6, which says, some believers. Okay, so some believers over here is based on tines, which literally just means some. Now, in the context, if we go back to verse 3, we have that same word. It's a different form in Greek, but it's the same Greek word, tisin. Sorry, let's clean that up just a little. So it's the form tisin, but it's the same word. Tines and tisin are the same Greek word. And in verse 3, the some refers to the false teachers. They are the some that Timothy is to charge to stop teaching false beliefs. In verse 6, tines ya is again the false teachers. It's picking up on that same group from verse 3. But in the Passion Translation, it's changed from some to some believers. Now, this gives the impression that it's general members of the church in Ephesus. But that's not what Paul was talking about. Then we've got have been led astray by teachings. Some believers have been led astray by teachings. What he's done here is he's put the verb into the passive voice. They've been led astray. Something's been done to them. What we actually have, though, is astochesantes exetrapesan, means that they, having swerved from the faithful path, have turned. Do you sense the active here? Some, having swerved, have turned into vain discussions. But here he's talking about the false teachers who have themselves turned from the truth into pointless discussions. But in the Passion Translation, we're talking not about the leaders that have led people astray, but about some believers, members, who have been led astray by false teachings. The active, this is an act, both these verbs are active, and then they converted into passives there. By teachings and speculations that emphasize nothing more than empty words. No problem with that. Oh, humble apologies. This is actually verse 7, not verse 6. So make a mental note of that. All right. Thelontes ine didaskali, wanting to be teachers of the law. They presume to be expert teachers of the law. No problem here. But they don't have the slightest idea what they're talking about. Me nountes, not understanding. Mete halegusin, either what they are saying. Mete peritinon veveunte, or the things about which they make bold assertions. Everything here is great until we get to this last phrase. And what happens here is this last phrase in the Passion Translation reads, and they simply love to argue. Now, in the context of 1 Timothy, this is undoubtedly true. So, in the pastoral epistles, the false teachers love to argue about words and dispute speculative theologies and so on. But the corresponding expression over here simply says that they make confident assertions. In other words, they insist. They don't understand the things they're saying, but they make confident or bold assertions about those things. Or in one other passage where the word is used in the New Testament, not instead. Come on, Kev. They insist that their view is right. Now, this is totally missing from the Passion Translation. There's nothing here that says, they don't understand what they're talking about, and yet they make bold assertions about their subject matter. Somehow that has become, and they love to argue, which may be true, but it's just not what stands written in the text. So what do we make of all this? As a paraphrase, much of it's not too serious. There are certainly some things that seem to have been changed somewhat and are off the money. The claim about Aramaic is frankly bizarre. Where this becomes problematic is that the Passion Translation claims not to be a paraphrase. It claims to be a translation of the original, and as such to be something that you could potentially use as your primary Bible. Strongly don't recommend that. Try to stick to a version that actually translates the original Greek text. Hope that's helpful. Welcome your thoughts. If you have been using the Passion Translation or wondering about it, why don't you drop a note or two about your experiences and perceptions. I'd love to hear those and interact a little bit around them. Remember to like and subscribe if you're enjoying this content, and look forward to continuing our journey through 1 Timothy.